When Queen Camilla leaned in to speak to Princess Charlotte, she didn't realize Catherine was watching. And what happened next changed everything. Do you think Catherine was right to step in, or should she have stayed silent for the sake of royal unity? That's the question everyone's asking tonight. Before we go any further, hit subscribe, because this story goes much deeper than one awkward comment. It started like any other spring weekend on the royal calendar, planned down to the minute, filled with family obligations, set against the backdrop of Windsor. But something about this particular gathering didn't sit well with Princess Catherine. She had learned to trust her instincts over the years, especially when it came to her children. Charlotte had been unusually silent all morning, not moody or angry, just withdrawn, as if trying to blend into the background. And that wasn't like her at all. The family had gathered at Windsor Castle for a private luncheon, honoring one of the Queen Consort's recent charitable patronages. These moments weren't rare, but they brought together several generations under one roof. Camilla's people, Catherine's family, and often a blend of extended royals who didn't always mix well. Catherine didn't mind these events, but she remained cautious. While Prince William could relax into his role, she had to watch everything. That afternoon, Charlotte had been asked to sit with the younger group of royal cousins in one of the side salons. It was a formal enough setting, but casual by royal standards. The children were expected to behave, make polite conversation, and enjoy their afternoon tea while the adults mingled in the main hall. Catherine had helped Charlotte into her seat, kissed her forehead, and left the room with a last glance. Nothing seemed off, at least not yet. But something changed later. About 45 minutes into the gathering, Catherine was in conversation with a senior courtier when she saw Charlotte walk past one of the open doors across the corridor. The little girl wasn't crying, but her face had turned pale, her mouth tightly pressed into a line. She looked hurt, not in the scraped knee sense, emotionally bruised. Catherine excused herself mid-sentence and followed. She found Charlotte alone at the far end of the hallway near one of the service doors. Her hands were clasped in front of her, and she was staring at the floor. "What happened?" Catherine asked gently. Charlotte hesitated. "Nothing, Mommy." But Catherine had crouched to her eye level now. "Sweetheart, I know when something's wrong." Charlotte's voice came out quietly. "Granny Camilla said I was showing off. She told me not to speak unless I was spoken to." Catherine blinked. "When did she say that?" "When I told Louis the answer to a question," Charlotte said. "We were just playing a guessing game, but she got annoyed." Catherine didn't reply right away. She pulled Charlotte into a hug and held her there, steady and calm on the outside, but everything inside her had shifted. She had always tried to maintain peace with Camilla, even when their relationship felt like a forced dance. Camilla had her own views on hierarchy and behavior, and while she often masked them with a smile, her tone sometimes gave her away. Still, Catherine had assumed that those jabs and snubs would never extend to her children. But she was wrong. Later that day, Catherine sat beside Charlotte during the family walk through the gardens. Camilla was ahead, walking beside Charles, chatting as if the morning had unfolded without tension. Catherine watched her carefully. Now, it wasn't just the remark. It was the fact that Charlotte had felt the need to hide. After the garden tour, the families regrouped inside. Catherine kept a subtle eye on everything. At one point, Charlotte reached for a second scone at the refreshment table. Camilla turned, glanced down, and said with a half smile, "Perhaps one is enough, darling. We don't want to appear greedy." There it was again. Catherine saw it clearly now. It wasn't a one-time thing. These were patterns, small moments that didn't seem harsh if taken alone, but added up when directed at the same child over and over. Catherine didn't react right away. She wasn't the type to make a scene, but her silence had always been deliberate, and now she had enough to stop staying silent. William hadn't noticed anything yet. He had been busy with Charles and a few senior aides discussing schedules. But later that evening, once they were back at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine would bring it up as a mother who had seen something she couldn't ignore. But before that conversation could happen, something else unfolded. Catherine didn't go into royal life expecting it to be easy. She understood the weight of duty, the unspoken rules, and trying to keep up appearances while dealing with real life behind the scenes. But what she never accepted, what she would never accept, was anyone making her children feel small, especially not someone inside the family. The moment came just after tea had been cleared. The adults moved into one of the sitting rooms off the main gallery. It was an old habit carried over from the Queen's time. The children were allowed in for a while before being taken upstairs by their nannies. Charlotte had walked in with George and Louis, her expression neutral. She sat beside the fireplace, flipping through a book she'd picked off the shelf. That's when Camilla entered the room carrying her glass of water, laughing softly with one of her longtime aides. Her mood seemed light. She spotted the children, gave a brief smile, then turned toward the adults. But within a few minutes, the laughter faded. George and Louis had wandered toward their grandfather, standing by Charles's side, while Charlotte remained on the armchair. A few moments later, Charlotte asked Camilla politely, "May I play the piano for a bit?" Camilla glanced over her shoulder. "The piano?" "Yes," Charlotte said, just quietly. Camilla took a sip from her glass, then looked directly at her. "Darling, that's not necessary. Let the grown-ups enjoy some peace. Why don't you sit still like a proper young lady?" It wasn't loud or cruel, but it was pointed. The words cut in a way that adults often underestimate. The tone was sharp. It made Charlotte's cheeks flush. She quietly closed her book and folded her hands. Catherine heard it. She had been standing nearby, speaking with Lady Lansdowne. Her eyes darted to Charlotte, then to Camilla. She didn't say anything yet, but her stare held longer than usual, and Camilla noticed. Their eyes met for a brief second before Camilla looked away. The room moved on. Conversations restarted, but the energy shifted. Back at Adelaide Cottage that evening, Catherine tucked Charlotte into bed herself. The house was quieter now. William was finishing up a call with his private secretary, and George was already asleep. Catherine sat on the edge of Charlotte's bed and asked, "Did you feel upset today?" Charlotte looked unsure. "A little, but I'm okay." "You don't have to pretend," Catherine said gently. Charlotte nodded. "Granny Camilla doesn't like when I talk too much." There it was, honest, direct, and no confusion. Catherine kissed her forehead, stood up, and walked down the hall. When she passed the study, William looked up. "Is she all right?" he asked. "She's trying to be," Catherine replied. William leaned back in his chair. "What happened?" Catherine told him everything, not with anger but with clarity. She repeated Charlotte's words. Then she described how she had seen Camilla's cold remarks, dismissiveness, and repeated efforts to silence or shrink Charlotte's presence. William listened and didn't interrupt, but when Catherine finished, his jaw was set. "This isn't something we let slide," she said. "I agree," he replied, "but we handle it carefully." The next morning, Catherine requested that Charlotte stay home from her next scheduled event. It was a charity garden project that Camilla had arranged for a mix of royal grandchildren. Catherine made up an excuse about a minor cold. But the truth was that she didn't want Charlotte in that space again, not until she was sure it would be safe. Word reached Camilla that Charlotte wouldn't be attending. She didn't say much, only raised a brow when one of her aides mentioned it, then made a remark under her breath. Probably too delicate for a little mud. Catherine heard about that too. The royal households talk more than they admit. The situation might have stayed there, if not for what happened the following weekend. It was a small private dinner at Highgrove. Charles had invited both William and Catherine, hoping for a relaxed evening. The plan was simple: spend time as a family, reconnect, and discuss upcoming royal tour. But when Catherine walked into the main lounge with Charlotte, who had come just to greet her grandfather before bedtime, things escalated quickly. Camilla barely looked up from her seat by the fire. Charlotte walked in, smiled politely, and said, "Good evening, Granny." Camilla didn't smile back. "Are you sure you're not too tired to be here?" It was a thinly veiled jab, and everyone in the room heard it. Catherine's eyes didn't leave Camilla. This time, she wasn't waiting until later. Her stillness alone shifted the mood in the room. The polite smile she had worn when they entered was gone now, replaced by something sharper. She turned to Charlotte and said calmly, "Why don't you say good night to Grandpa and head upstairs with Anna?" Charlotte, a little uncertain, glanced up at her mother. Catherine gave her a small nod. The young girl moved toward Charles, hugged him, then left the room with the family nanny. As the door clicked shut behind them, silence followed. Camilla sat back, still holding her glass of wine. She looked around, then muttered lightly, "Well, she's very sensitive, isn't she?" William froze. His father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but Catherine stepped forward now, every word chosen with care. "No, she's not too sensitive. She's a child, and she deserves to be spoken to with kindness." Camilla raised a brow. "I didn't mean it that way. I was just surprised she's still up at this hour. It's hardly something to get upset about." Catherine didn't blink. "It wasn't just tonight. It's been happening for weeks. I've heard what's been said to her, and so has she." The room grew colder. Charles tried to intervene. "Darling, perhaps we should all just—" "No," Catherine interrupted, still calm but firm. "If it were just one comment, we'd move on. But it's not one comment, it's a pattern. And I won't stand by while my daughter is made to feel less than." Camilla looked at William, expecting him to step in, but he didn't. His silence spoke louder than words. "I've tried to keep peace," Catherine continued, "because that's what's expected of me. I've ignored moments that didn't feel right. But this is different. This involves Charlotte, and I won't let anyone, no matter who they are, undermine her confidence." Camilla set her glass down, finally leaning forward. "You're reading too much into this. You always take things so seriously. Children are resilient." Catherine's expression didn't change. Children remember how they're spoken to, especially by those who are supposed to protect them. There was nothing theatrical about it. Catherine didn't storm or shout, but the power in her voice was undeniable. It was the voice of a mother who had drawn a line. William finally spoke. "We're asking for basic respect. Charlotte hasn't done anything wrong. She's just being herself. That shouldn't be a problem." Camilla looked at Charles, but he was silent now too. He knew better than to push. Catherine was laying down a boundary, and once she did that, there was no going back. After a tense few minutes, Catherine excused herself and left the room. William followed shortly after. Upstairs, Catherine sat by Charlotte's bedside again. This time, she didn't ask if something was wrong. She just held her daughter's hand. "You did nothing wrong," she told her. "You were polite, you were kind, and that's all I'll ever ask of you." Charlotte looked up at her. "I tried to be." "You don't have to try to be perfect," Catherine said. "You just have to be you." Downstairs, Charles tried to smooth things over by changing the topic. Camilla, though, said little. She didn't apologize, but she didn't defend herself again either. Later that night, back at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine and William talked in their room. Catherine was still steady, but the day had worn her down. "She doesn't need to like me," she said, "but she will treat Charlotte with respect. That's non-negotiable." "She will," William said, "because we're not letting this continue." The days that followed were polite but different. The next event was Charlotte's school recital held at Lambrook, and Catherine made the decision to only invite immediate family. Camilla was not included. The palace phrased it as a scheduling conflict, but insiders knew what it meant. In the press, nothing changed. Smiling photographs were released as usual, showing unity and grace. But inside the palace walls, a shift had happened. Camilla remained present at major events, but she kept her distance from Charlotte. There were no more offhand remarks, no more looks, at least not within Catherine's earshot. But Catherine had drawn a boundary, and even in a family built on centuries of hierarchy and deference, some boundaries couldn't be crossed without consequence. Yet things weren't fully settled. Camilla had taken the warning, but she hadn't forgotten it. And the next time the family gathered at Balmoral for the summer, one more moment would push everything to the edge. Balmoral had always been Charles's escape. A place to breathe, to walk, to think without flashing cameras. For decades, it was the late Queen's favorite spot, and the family still respected that rhythm. Every summer they gathered there. It was tradition. But this year, beneath the fresh Scottish air and peaceful countryside, the mood had shifted. Catherine had agreed to come, but with boundaries. She and William brought all 3 children as expected, but Catherine had already told William she wouldn't leave Charlotte alone, not even for a few minutes, not with Camilla again. Everyone arrived staggered over a few days. Charles was the first to greet them at the estate, arms open and cheerful. He adored his grandchildren and looked forward to time with them. Camilla followed a day later, arriving with her usual entourage and carefully selected wardrobe. She had been quiet since the incident at Highgrove. She hadn't spoken to Catherine directly since then, only through short formal exchanges during public engagements. Still, everyone tried to act like nothing had happened. The first few days at Balmoral were calm. Long walks, horseback rides, dinners filled with laughter. Charlotte began to ease up. Catherine saw her slowly returning to herself, chatty at breakfast, running through the fields with George and Louis, even helping one of the kitchen staff bake scones one afternoon. But the moment came when Catherine was in the drawing room with Lady Sarah Chatto and a few aides. William had gone fishing with Charles. The children had been playing in the garden, supervised by 2 staff members. It was the first time since their arrival that Catherine had taken her eyes off them for more than 5 minutes. Then one of the household aides leaned in and said, "I believe Princess Charlotte is in the sun room with Her Majesty." Catherine's posture stiffened. She didn't move right away, but the words echoed in her mind. She excused herself without explanation and walked briskly toward the sun room. As she approached, she heard voices. One was Camilla's, the other was Charlotte's. Catherine paused, listening. "We don't always need to speak over others, Charlotte," Camilla was saying. "It's important to listen. Sometimes your mommy forgets that too." Charlotte didn't reply. Catherine opened the door. Camilla looked up, surprised. "There you are," Catherine said evenly. "I was looking for you, darling." Charlotte got up and walked straight to her mother's side. "I was just having a word," Camilla said, her tone light but with a trace of edge. "I heard," Catherine replied. Camilla raised her brow. She was only being a child," Catherine cut in, still calm. "And she doesn't need to be corrected for that every time she speaks." Camilla folded her arms. "I've raised children. I know when a girl's growing too fast for her own good." "She's growing up just fine," Catherine said firmly, "and she'll do so without being made to feel like a problem." There was no shouting, just clarity, the kind that left no room for argument. "I'd like a bit more kindness around her," Catherine added. "That shouldn't be too much to ask." Camilla didn't speak. Her silence was calculated, but Catherine didn't care anymore. She had spent years protecting the institution. Now her focus had shifted to something more important, protecting her daughter. After they left the room, Catherine knelt beside Charlotte in the hallway. "You did nothing wrong," she whispered. Charlotte nodded, but her eyes were watery. Catherine told her, "You never need to be afraid of speaking up." By the end of the week, the palace staff had noticed that Camilla kept her distance. At meal times, she sat farther away from the children. She didn't comment on their behavior, their clothes, or their tone. It was a subtle change, but in the royal world, subtlety meant everything. Catherine hadn't exploded. She hadn't caused a scandal, but her presence had drawn a line no one could miss. Even Charles, who had hoped it would all smooth over with time, knew better than to intervene again. He adored both women, but he understood that when Catherine stood her ground, she did so with reason and with finality. That summer ended with the usual photos. Family on the castle steps, smiling for the press, waving at well-wishers. But inside, things had changed. Camilla had lost something she didn't even realize was slipping. Catherine's willingness to tolerate things for the sake of appearance. That tolerance was gone now. And while the world saw a united royal family, behind closed doors, one mother had made sure her daughter would never feel small again. So, what would you have done if you were in Catherine's shoes? Do you think Camilla crossed a line, or was this just a clash of two different generations? Let me know in the comments. And if you made it this far, hit like, because stories like this don't stay buried for long. Subscribe for more royal deep dives, and we'll see you in the next one.